Well, tonight, two families will say a prayer before they retire to bed. But they will be expecting different answers come tomorrow morning. The family of Ruth Kamande, who is accused of killing her boyfriend, and that of Farid Mohammed, the let, was stabbed 22 times by Ruth in Buruburu in 2015. The court found Ruth guilty of murder, and Justice Jessel Sit is set to make the ruling tomorrow. This is just but one of the many cases of domestic feuds that turned deadly. Just this week alone, at least 6 people were killed in their homes by the very people they expected will protect them from harm. In the last cases of domestic violence reported yesterday, 2 men in different incidents killed their children and wives following domestic quarrels. One of those cases happened at a police station in Embu County. On the big story tonight, we give you the stories behind these families and conflict and why homicide at the family levels is on the rise.
Accused of stabbing her boyfriend 22 times, leading to his death.
Mother's most fall shocks as man swindled out of cash makes his wife and children pay for it with their lives before killing himself.
Family in Juja is mourning after a man killed his wife and 3 children before setting himself ablaze in their family house.
A somber mood has engulfed a village in Juja constituency after a middle-aged man killed his entire family, then took his own life last evening.
Residents of Vumilia area in Donholm Estate are still reeling in shock after a 31-year-old woman killed her 2 children, then killed herself.
Well, those scenarios there clearly paint the picture of the big story tonight. And I shall be speaking to Dr. Frank Njenga and Dr. Susan Gitao, both highly experienced psychiatrists and psychologists. But before I speak to them, let me bring in our lead reporter, Sophia Onuna, who is on standby for us in the city center. Sophia, good evening. Welcome to the program. You've had those, sound bites that we've played earlier, of course, of different cases of homicide, families standing on each other. It seems these cases are on the rise.
Indeed, good evening, Yusuf. It appears these cases are on the rise, a worrying trend indeed at this time and age, especially in an institution of marriage when 2 people come together, making those vows to be together in good times, for better, for worse, till death do them part. And then to see murder take place in the name of love, these acts of murder that have been witnessed, some beginning with injuries that then later lead to death. We've seen torching of houses. And the saddest part, Yusuf, is the children, innocent souls, who many, if not all times, have no idea really what is going on. And so what really happens to get these individuals, and it's men and women, you've had those reports we have been highlighting on KTN News across the media in the recent past, really deserving of attention of a country to come together, whether it's a government, non-government actors, the society in general, to be able to intervene and look at what can be done to ensure these senseless deaths are averted. And you've talked about even that recent case we saw in Likoni, a man torching his house, setting it on fire, killing his 2 children, his wife, his mother-in-law, himself in there as well. Another incident in Nandi, we saw a man who thought and feared that his wife was cheating on him, was involved in an affair, killing her as well. Another woman in Dandora, Yusuf, stabbing her husband to death, and it was after they'd quarreled and she had said she'd do something that would command headlines in news. And in fact, in that particular instance, following that killing, this particular story making it to the news. So these cases, Yusuf, happening. I've been speaking to some lawyers that practice family law, and they're talking about some of the causes and some of the things that they've seen and heard, cited, and some of the cases they've been able to handle, including infidelity, that when one fears or sees or has evidence that their partner is stepping out on them, then in a moment of almost insanity, in the heat of the moment, they lose lose their minds and they act in this rage, out of rage in this manner that ends in tragedy. So whether it's infidelity, in some cases it's questions around finances, poverty, and a feeling that all hope is lost, there is no point to leave, and taking out their families, some out of anger because of decisions around finances by their spouses, or others because they feel they cannot move forward as men, they cannot provide, and so they take out their family in that crazy and insane moment, thinking they're taking them all out of their misery. And also, Yusuf, there's a question around drugs and alcohol. Of course, this alters normal behavior. Again, getting one to a moment where they lose themselves. And sometimes it's in heated arguments, in a moment where a very thin line between love, this person you once loved, and it all turns to hate. And it's either grabbing something in the house or shooting the spouse. We've had incidences such as this, or killing and then taking their own lives. So really issues that need to be looked into, especially in one instance we heard from family members of a man in Kiambu County who was working as a manager in a quarry, and he did not report to work for a week, switched off his phone, and it was only when his house went up in flames, killing all 3 children, his wife alongside himself, that the tragic end of what had been an acrimonious relationship with his wife came to the fore. They had sought marital counseling, and so in these instances, even when intervention had been sought, it did not help. And one of the family friends had later then said that this man had complained of stress in his marriage and felt that things were not working and was seeking a way out. And so we will be looking forward to hear from our guests in studio who have vast experience and can break down what can be done, because in many of these cases you will hear, Yusuf, there are always those telltale signs. It's not usually from nowhere, from the blues. It will be something here, an incident here or there that then is aggravated and gets to this deadly end. And tomorrow we will hear the sentencing of Ruth Kamande. As you mentioned, she was found guilty of stabbing her boyfriend in 2016. She was crowned the Miss Langata Women's Prison, finalist, winning that crown. And so we'll be waiting to see what emerges from that. But definitely this is a very worrying trend. In fact, in 2015, a report by the National Center for Crimes found that 38% of women and 20% of men had experienced this kind of violence in home, leading to deaths. Another time finding that Mombasa County was leading worryingly at 97%. It's unclear where those numbers stand now, but definitely this is an issue of concern, one that even as we all know, Yusuf, no relationship is perfect. There will be arguments here and there, disagreements, different points of view. But for it to get to a place that a life is taken, that sacred life, and when you see kids as well, really unfortunate, really heartbreaking, and therefore a matter that we have chosen to put front and center to be able to break down and hope that this message reaches out. And also for those who notice their loved ones and people around them going through issues, not to take those lightly, because as we have seen with these rising cases of murder in marriage, worrying, and those that everyone who can must do something to try at least and stop them, Yusuf.
Thank you very much, Sophia, for that very heartbreaking, very devastating reports coming out of this country. As I've already mentioned, we have experts in studio. I'm going to, of course, we're going to probe this matter even deeper for our viewers shortly. But here is a breakdown of recent deadly cases of domestic violence as put out by Sophia. There, we're going to get those infographics for you shortly on the screen before we start our discussion tonight. Well, as we wait for those infographics to come over, or actually it's ready. Let me just go through them quickly before we start our discussion tonight. There you go. On April 7th in Nairobi, Titus Masika killed his wife and 2-year-old child. And then on May 8th, still in Nairobi, Maina Kawaranu accused of killing his wife and 2 children as well. There's very deadly domestic violence taking place in this country. Then over on July 16th, still this year, a man killed his wife, 2 children and mother-in-law. That is in Likoni, Mombasa. Then another incident, Amos Langura lit up his house, killed his child and himself in Mbere, I believe that is in Embu County. There are a lot of cases that have gone, that have been reported. There you go, Ruth Kamande's case, a case that we expect the sentencing to be made tomorrow. She was found guilty of murder. She killed her boyfriend, Farid Mohammed Delet. The offense was committed back in the year 2015. She was later crowned as Miss Langata Prison in 2016. Of course, as I've already mentioned, the sentencing is set for tomorrow morning, right here in the capital, Nairobi. And then still, on Ruth Kamande's argument, she says that she did the stabbing in self-defense, and after she discovered her boyfriend then was undergoing HIV treatment, Mohammed attempted to rape me, that's what she said. And her argument still is that Delet Mohammed attempted to kill her. And then the court findings, there you go, they found the victim was stabbed 22 times with a kitchen knife. The court accused actions, of course, are malicious. And once again, we do expect that sentencing to take place tomorrow. And then the court ruled rape allegations false and afterthought. And the medical reports, they failed to prove internal injuries claims. Now, in studio, I have Dr. Frank Njenga and Dr. Susan Gitau. Dr. Susan Gitau is a counseling psychologist, and she also doubles up as a lecturer at the African Nazarene University. Dr. Frank Njenga is a psychiatrist. Good evening, gentlemen and lady. Welcome to the program. Dr. Susan, let me begin with you, and let me begin with that story that I've just read out of Ruth Kamande. Of course, we expect that sentencing tomorrow. Apparently, she stabbed her boyfriend 22 times following a domestic fight. And of course, she was found guilty of murder. Now, just to kick off our discussion tonight, can you perhaps tell us what will make lovers, or lovebirds, to turn hostile on each other?
There's so many reasons that make lovers turn against each other and even killing each other. We do have unfinished businesses. Say, for example, they have unresolved conflicts. And if they pile up, there are people who are not able to put up with our pressure, and it can come out in violence form. We also do have some, and I know Dr. Njenga is going to expound more on this, that have mental illness. We also have some people, they actually have very low emotional tolerance ability. So there are people who have quick anger, they have very poor anger management skills, and they will definitely turn on each other. We also do have some people who are affected by the cycle from the family of origin. So for example, if that was the scenario at home, your mother and your dad, that is how they solved issues. They used the kitchenware to sort out businesses. They used maybe even the farm tools to sort out businesses. You also find yourself doing the same because children actually model what parents do. And in the course of doing that, you find you have actually killed somebody. We also do have some people who have depression, and depression can come from psychosocial issues. It can also be a mental health condition. But the ones that come from psychosocial issues, you realize there's some people who cannot put up with pressure, life pressure. For example, if I am down financially, or if I have made a very bad deal, this happens mostly with men. You realize if they cannot handle that, they have very limited emotional resilience. The people that they turn to happen to be the safe objects. And those are sometimes the children and their family members. Yes. We do also have some cases of past experiences. Maybe you have experienced hurt, betrayal in the past, and you have not healed. You have not seen a counselor. What happens is that you act without thinking. Yes. Yes,
Dr. Before you engage Dr. Njenga there, let me just continue with you, Dr. Susan. Can you perhaps take us through the anatomy, of family murder, the patterns, their signs? How will, family members identify that they have a potential killer among them? How can they best, identify this? Because if they don't do that, then it might result into this devastating news that we've just read out.
So I've always said that marriages and families have a cycle. And in most cases, you can tell when people are in the honeymoon mood. When people are courting, you can tell how this person was. Apparently, you realize there are very many people who do not go through those stages. Or if they did, they skipped some, or they never worked with a mentor or even a marriage and family therapist. So you can find that people are keen. If you are aware and you are also watchful of your partner, you realize they are changing. If the way you are talking, maybe it's become abusive, they are insulting you, they are critiquing you, they are actually stalking you, they are complaining about so many things, sometimes things that you wouldn't even imagine somebody would complain about. If they also try to hit you, and sometimes it's not even hitting actually, trying, you need to know it is a telltale sign. So most people are not able to read this.
Yes, and we're going to talk about how this can be avoided shortly. I believe Dr. Njenga is now with me. Dr. Frank Njenga is a psychiatrist. Dr. Njenga, good evening. Welcome to the program. I believe you've had the explanation there from Dr. Susan. Can you perhaps tell us this? From the evidence we've seen, the various stories that we've read for the better part of this year, it seems, that there is an increase in domestic violence cases in this country.
I'd actually like to start off with a caveat, and the caveat is as follows, that most crime in the world is committed by people who do not have mental illnesses. The presence of two experts in the field of mental health might lead the world to think that we are invited here because many of our patients commit criminal things. They don't. The second thing is that most people who have mental illnesses do not in their lives commit any crime of any sort. The reason we are discussing this matter here today is in part because of the drama that is associated with criminal activities the world over. And it's very exciting to imagine that people who commit murder, for example, have as a prerequisite a mental disorder. The second thing I'd like us to be cautioned about is the fact that we are not qualified to comment on matters that are currently before court. The maxim of commenting on matters that are before court.
Of course, we're not going. We're not going into merits. We're not going into the merits and demerits of the case. We're just looking at the broader picture. We've seen various cases of families turning on each other. Of course, the sentencing of the lady in fact that's tomorrow is just one of the many cases.
We as experts might say. So anything we as experts might say has to be seen as a comment on the generality of cases of murder within the family context.
Exactly. That's exactly.
It's not a comment about
that is exactly why we invited you. Let me bring Dr. Susan into this conversation. Dr. Susan, you've had Dr. Njenga's point of view there, and actually it seems he has ruled out mental illness being one of the reasons why we're seeing family members, meting out violence on each other.
Well, I guess I believe where he's coming from. He's just thinking about ethics and probably thinking the show is about helping to make the judgment for tomorrow, and I hope that is not the case here. We're trying to save families. We are trying to restore hope for the marriages and families that could be on the rocks. And I believe, as much as he says it's not a case of mental illness, they are the ones who talk about the psychiatrists do talk about when you do a psychiatric history taking and you realize maybe in this family there have been cases of schizophrenia, cases of depression. And believe you me, in simple terms to a layman, depression is anger turned inward. So when it is not managed well, definitely somebody is going to commit a crime, even though maybe they didn't intend. So probably he has his own basis of arguing the way he's arguing, but I guess he has a warning here. It is not about using the opinion in this show, but it's about saving a family.
Yes, away from the reasons, now, Dr. Njenga, we've seen scenarios where spouses, kill their partners by even paying, criminals to met out this, tragedies on their life partners, especially their husband. How can you best explain this kind of a situation? What does this say about the society that we're in?
Again, I think it's important to look at the trends globally. The trends globally is that violence, intimate partner violence all over the world is increasing. It's not just here in Kenya. One could think that we in Kenya have got it completely wrong, and we are the only ones who are involved and engaged in instances where men in particular are injuring and killing their spouses. That is very sadly a trend that is global. Secondly, in many of these instances where there is violence at home, alcohol and other drugs are very commonly involved. My colleague has mentioned the presence of mental illness. Yeah. In fact, I would like to associate myself with that sentiment, that a combination of alcohol or other drugs and some forms of mental illnesses in the background of difficulties and challenges in a marital environment are almost the prerequisites of the kind of violence that we are discussing this evening.
And there's a question that I've posed to Dr. Susan earlier, Dr. Njenga. How can you perhaps identify, or are there warning, are there signs for family members to identify an individual who might, at the end of the day, cause tragedy in families?
The answer is both yes and no, and this sounds almost ridiculous as a proposition. Yes, you have certain predictors that will indicate the likelihood that there will be violence in a domestic environment. The first and most obvious is past history of violence in the home. In other words, when a married woman goes to her mother or to her father or to her pastor or to her doctor and says, he came home last night and he beat me up and he threatened to kill me, the mother, the father, the pastor, the friend, the neighbor, the doctor must take that extremely seriously. In other words, before murder is committed in situations such as this one, there are many early warning signs which are very often missed, and they are almost associated with alcohol or drug abuse, past history of violence, and verbalized threats that violence will be visited on the intimate partner. So there are many early warning signs that are given to us, but we often tell our daughters and our sisters, marriage is for life, stay in that union, don't leave, and then very sadly we end up sending them flowers on their funeral.
Very unfortunate there. Now, Dr. Susan, you've already given us the various causes, the characteristic of people who might potentially, be murderers. But apparently, they are ordinary people. People are normal, who don't have any mental problem. They've not undergone any kind of depression. I mean, people who are known to be, all-rounded, they're well, they're very normal. And then you find a situation where these are the same people who've committed, the most heinous crime. How can you best explain that kind of a situation?
Well, we do have some people, even though they show maybe the outside world how much they love their maybe wives or their spouses, it could be deep down they have morbid jealousy. And they become so obsessed about tracking the movements of their spouses, even in the workplace, wherever they go, they will even take their phones. To me, I see there has to be a cause, and a cause that has not been discussed. And I'm very happy today because I'm joined by a psychiatrist, because we as counseling psychologists, when we have these people, they will tell you even how it started. We look at the genesis of how did this begin. And you realize if I got married to somebody and had not fully become aware of myself, I cannot say that I can't do that. Because if I am aware of myself, especially when we talk about emotional intelligence, I should be able to regulate my emotions. I should be able to regulate my thoughts. And in so doing, then I am in control of my actions. But how many people get there? And I want to tell you, when I am living alone, it's quite different when I start living with somebody else. Because there's a lot of exchange of either positive emotions or energies. That is when I feel I'm in love. That's when I feel I want to protect my loved ones. But there are times I do have the negative energies. And you realize in most cases, that's why we'll keep saying, let us do a lot of investigation, a lot of assessment on the psychological well-being of even partners. Because you may think, I am okay. When people are quoting, there's a lot. We say they have masks. But as we get along, when we get into that house together, we are living together, I'll be seeing you every day. I'll be experiencing you every day. But how many people resolve the very simple conflicts? Like you have left the socks just when you get inside there, you have left the dishes undone. How many people resolve those small issues? Because if they are not resolved, they pile up. And when they pile up, at times you do not know when the pressure will be too much to hold and somebody hits you.
And Dr. Njenga, let me give you the last thought before we take a break. Do you agree with Dr. Susan that it's the small issues that go unresolved, that pile up and later result to these tragedies, that we've been witnessing for the better part of this year in Kenya?
Those are symptoms, in my view, of the early signs that something more serious is coming. I think actually, if one is looking for early signs of the potential to kill another person, in addition to what Susan has said, one has to look up for deeper levels of disturbance, particularly in the men. And drug and alcohol abuse, instances of prior violence, even hitting out at a woman, slapping them and pushing them around and breaking television sets and breaking cups. Act that violence is on the way is a very serious and very ominous sign, which not many of us take as such.
Dr. Njenga will continue with this conversation. Of course, we're talking about love, family, and murder. We're going to look at various case studies, various situations that has happened in this country. One of them, a Kiambu man who killed his wife and 3 children because he was conned. Of course, you're watching the big story right here on KTN News. We're going to take a very short break. We'll return with much more. Stay there.